In the final months of 2025, the long static southern front in Ukraine erupted with dramatic change. What had been a landscape of tense but unmoving lines suddenly became the epicenter of a new and unpredictable phase of the war. The world watched as the region, long overshadowed by other fronts, was thrust into the spotlight, its fate hanging in the balance. For months, Russian forces projected an image of control over the Zaporizhia region, claiming the front was stable and unbreakable. Their propaganda emphasized strong fortifications, well-supplied troops, and a sense of unyielding dominance. Russian state media broadcast images of confident soldiers and seemingly impenetrable defenses, reassuring their public and sending a message to the world that the South was secure. But beneath this confident facade, cracks were forming in their defenses. Satellite imagery and intercepted communications hinted at mounting problems. Russian units, stretched thin and facing constant harassment, struggled to maintain their positions. The illusion of invincibility began to fade as the reality on the ground grew more precarious. Independent reports and Ukrainian sources revealed growing vulnerabilities in the Russian lines. Analysts noted gaps in the defensive network, while Ukrainian reconnaissance teams identified weak points ripe for exploitation. The international community, once skeptical of a breakthrough in the south, started to take notice of the shifting dynamics. The southern front, once a Russian stronghold, was becoming the most volatile theater of the war. Ukrainian forces, emboldened by new intelligence and Western support, began probing attacks and small-scale raids, testing Russian reactions and exposing further weaknesses. The tempo of operations increased, and the sense of inevitability grew. Sustained Ukrainian pressure and Russian military weaknesses set the stage for a rapid shift. Artillery barrages, drone strikes, and coordinated infantry assaults forced Russian units to fall back from key positions. The momentum was clearly shifting, and the Russian command struggled to adapt to the new reality. Logistical challenges, troop exhaustion, and command issues created fractures that Ukraine exploited. Russian supply lines, already stretched by months of fighting, buckled under the strain of renewed Ukrainian offensives. Morale among Russian troops plummeted as reinforcements and supplies failed to arrive in time. The perceived stability was a fragile illusion. As Ukrainian forces advanced, they found evidence of hasty retreats, abandoned equipment, personal belongings, and hastily dug graves. The psychological impact on both sides was profound, with Russian soldiers increasingly questioning their leadership and Ukrainian troops gaining confidence with every success. What began as small Ukrainian advances soon snowballed into a major crisis for Russian command. Panic spread through Russian ranks as defensive lines collapsed in multiple sectors. Ukrainian breakthroughs threatened to encircle entire units, forcing chaotic withdrawals and leaving behind valuable territory. For Ukraine, it was a golden opportunity to sever the land bridge to Crimea. For Russia, a sudden threat to its entire southern campaign. The strategic significance of the Zaporizhia corridor became undeniable, as control over this region could determine the fate of Crimea and the broader war effort. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the conflict. As both sides rushed reinforcements to the front, the world braced for a decisive battle. One that would not only determine the future of southern Ukraine, but potentially the outcome of the entire war. As Ukrainian pressure mounted, a stark contrast emerged between Russian propaganda and battlefield reality. Russian state media claimed Ukrainian collapse using fabricated reports and AI-generated videos, but social media and independent analysts showed Ukrainian troops raising flags in liberated towns. Geolocation experts confirmed Ukrainian advances, contradicting Moscow's narrative. Pro-war Russian bloggers began to admit the loss of territory and the intensity of Ukraine's push. Western think tanks confirmed Russian lines were under severe strain. The evidence showed Ukrainian forces making methodical gains, not collapsing. The gap between Russia's televised victories and the muddy reality of Zaporizhia grew wider. The information war revealed Russia's aspirations were outpacing its capabilities. Ukraine's pressure culminated in a massive 16-kilometer breach in Russian defenses. This was not a minor penetration but a systemic failure that shattered Russian positions. Morale among Russian troops collapsed as their supposed strongholds were exposed. The breach bypassed fortifications, allowing Ukrainian forces to pour into the Russian rear. The battlefield became chaotic, with Ukrainian mobile units exploiting confusion. Russian units fell back in disarray, some abandoning positions without orders. The breach revealed deep institutional weaknesses in Russia's military. For Ukraine, it was the breakthrough they'd sought, shifting from attrition to maneuver warfare. Ukrainian forces now threatened key Russian logistics and command centers. The crack in Russia's armor was a strategic opportunity to change the war's course. The breach in Zaporizhia put Russia's prized land bridge to Crimea in grave danger. This corridor is the main supply route connecting Russia to the annexed peninsula. If Ukraine reached the Sea of Azov, Russian forces in the south would be split in two. The threat sent shockwaves through Russia's military and political leadership. Losing the land bridge would be a military and political disaster for Moscow. The defense of this corridor became an all-or-nothing proposition. Ukrainian advances brought key highways and rail lines within artillery range, disrupting Russian logistics. The battle for the south became a race to the sea, with the fate of Crimea at stake. The open steppes of Zaporizhia played a crucial role in Russia's collapse. The flat terrain, ideal for fortifications, also made defenders visible and vulnerable to drones. Once breached, there were few natural obstacles for Russian troops to regroup. Russia's Surovikin line, a deep network of trenches and obstacles, was meant to be impenetrable, but the breach showed that even the strongest defenses are only as good as the troops manning them. Ukrainian forces exploited weak points, and the open terrain became a liability for disorganized defenders. Russian units retreating in chaos were easy targets for Ukrainian drones and artillery. The landscape that was supposed to protect Russia instead accelerated its defeat. A catastrophic failure in Russian command and control accelerated the collapse. As the battle intensified, Russian officers struggled to maintain any sense of order. The fog of war thickened, not just from the chaos of combat, but from a total breakdown in the very systems meant to keep units connected and coordinated. Communication systems broke down across radios, messaging apps, and even satellite links. Soldiers found themselves unable to reach headquarters or neighboring units. Radios crackled with static, messages went undelivered, and even satellite phones, once considered reliable, failed under the pressure of electronic warfare and relentless Ukrainian attacks. Isolated units couldn't receive orders or report on the situation, creating chaos. Cut off from their commanders, many Russian soldiers were left guessing about enemy movements and their own objectives. Some tried to use hand signals or runners, but confusion reigned as the chain of command disintegrated. Commanders were blind, unable to coordinate or respond to Ukrainian advances. Without real-time updates, they couldn't direct reinforcements or organize a coherent defense. The battlefield became a patchwork of isolated pockets, each fighting alone. Frontline troops were left to fend for themselves, leading to panicked retreats. Lacking guidance, many units abandoned their positions in disarray, often leaving behind equipment and wounded comrades. The sense of abandonment spread quickly, eroding morale. Even elite Russian units lost cohesion under pressure, revealing systemic problems. These were the best-trained soldiers, yet without clear orders or support, they too faltered, highlighting deep flaws in the military structure and preparedness. The loss of control over these formations alarmed Russian leadership. In Moscow, generals and officials watched the situation deteriorate, realizing that their grip on the front was slipping away with every passing hour. Russia's rigid, centralized command structure proved fragile in crisis. Orders had to travel up and down a strict hierarchy, causing fatal delays. When the system broke, there was no flexibility to adapt or improvise on the ground. In contrast, Ukraine's decentralized approach allowed rapid adaptation. Ukrainian commanders empowered junior officers to make decisions, enabling quick responses to changing battlefield conditions and outmaneuvering the disorganized Russian forces. The difference in command culture was decisive in the battle for Zaporizhia. Ukrainian units moved with purpose and coordination, while Russian lines crumbled under the weight of their own confusion and inflexibility. Russia's inability to communicate turned a tactical setback into a strategic disaster, leaving its forces shattered and its leadership searching for answers in the aftermath of defeat. The 33rd Assault Regiment spearheaded Ukraine's breakthrough. Highly trained and motivated, they punched through the most fortified Russian positions. Their capture of the village of Kosiv triggered the broader Russian collapse. Using mechanized infantry, armor, and precise artillery, they overwhelmed defenders. The fall of Kosiv was both a tactical and psychological blow to Russia. The regiment exploited the breach rapidly, preventing Russia from regrouping. Their speed and aggression kept Russian command off balance. The 33rd success highlighted the importance of well-led, determined troops. Their actions turned the tide in Zaporizhia and showcased Ukraine's growing military prowess. After breaching the front and capturing Kosiv, Ukrainian forces pressed toward Lukanki and Primorsky. These towns sit on key routes to the Sea of Azov, vital for Russian logistics. Capturing them would further isolate Russian units and threaten the land bridge. Ukraine's advance dismantled Russian defenses piece by piece. Russia's command downplayed the crisis, but elite units struggled to contain the push. Fighting continued elsewhere, but Ukraine maintained momentum in the south. Despite Russian offensives in the east, Ukraine managed resources across fronts. The push toward the coast brought Ukraine closer to severing Russia's strategic link to Crimea. The breach in Zaporizhia is more than just a territorial loss for Russia. It represents a dramatic shift in the dynamics of this brutal conflict. For months, the front lines in southern Ukraine have been locked in a deadly stalemate, with both sides suffering heavy casualties and little ground gained. Now, Ukrainian forces have managed to punch through some of Russia's most heavily fortified positions, signaling a possible turning point that could reshape the entire war. If Ukraine can push all the way to the Sea of Azov, it would sever the land bridge connecting Russian-occupied territories in the east to Crimea. This would leave Crimea isolated, cut off from vital supplies and reinforcements, and make it extremely difficult for Russia to defend its prized peninsula. The strategic implications are enormous, potentially altering the balance of power in the region. For Moscow, such a development would be nothing short of a military and political catastrophe. Russian leaders are now facing the prospect of losing a key foothold, and the pressure is mounting as they scramble to respond to Ukraine's advances. But the cost of this progress is staggering. Entire villages have been reduced to rubble, with homes, schools, and hospitals destroyed. Civilians are being forced to flee, leaving behind everything they know, as cities are evacuated under the constant threat of shelling and airstrikes. Every kilometer of liberated land is paid for in blood and sacrifice. Ukrainian soldiers face relentless artillery barrages and minefields, while medics work tirelessly to save the wounded amid the chaos of battle. The human toll is immense, and the scars of this conflict will last for generations. Yet the momentum has clearly shifted. Russia, once dictating the pace and direction of the fighting, is now forced to react to Ukrainian initiatives. The sense of control is slipping from Moscow's grasp as their troops are pushed back and forced to regroup. Russian counterattacks, once feared for their intensity, have so far failed to reverse the damage. Abandoned tanks and shattered equipment litter the battlefield, stark reminders of failed attempts to regain lost ground. The collapse of the southern front demonstrates just how quickly the momentum in war can shift. What seemed impossible only weeks ago is now unfolding in real time, as Ukrainian advances redraw the map and force both sides to reconsider their strategies. For Russia, this is a direct threat to the entire campaign, a blow to morale, and a challenge to their long-term objectives. For Ukraine, it's a rare opportunity, a chance to achieve a decisive victory that could change the course of the war and restore hope to a nation under siege. The coming months will be critical. The world is watching to see whether this breach in Zaporizhia will be remembered as a mere footnote in a long and bloody war, or as the moment that changed everything, setting the stage for a new chapter in Ukraine's fight for survival.